The courthouse smelled faintly of polished wood and coffee, a blend of formality and fatigue that always hung heavy in the air. On that Monday morning, the building pulsed with its usual rhythm. Lawyers hustling in press suits, clerks balancing stacks of files, bailiffs speaking in clipped commands. Every person seemed to know their place, every role rehearsed countless times before. And then came Marcus. At just 17, Marcus wasn't supposed to belong there. He wasn't an attorney. He wasn't a paralegal. He wasn't even a law student. He was a teenager who should have been worrying about his math exam or hanging out with friends after school. But fate had dragged him into this arena. He walked through the towering oak doors of courtroom 3B with a slim notebook tucked under his arm, his sneakers squeaking softly against the marble floor. His polo shirt and khakis looked pitifully plain compared to the sea of sharp suits and ties that filled the room. People noticed him immediately. Heads turned. Conversations paused. A ripple of confusion spread among the gathered audience. Some whispered to their neighbors, curious about what a boy like him was doing in a place like this. Marcus didn't flinch, though his palms were damp with nervous sweat. He had rehearsed this moment in his head for days, telling himself that if he kept his step steady and his eyes forward, he could fake the confidence he didn't fully feel. His brother's future depended on it. At the defendant's table sat his older brother, Daniel, 23 years old and visibly drained. Dark circles hung under Daniel's eyes from sleepless nights of stress. His shoulders sagged under the weight of the accusation. Reckless damage to a wealthy neighbor's luxury car. The neighbor claimed Daniel had been careless, had scratched the side of his expensive vehicle while carrying supplies into their shared apartment building. The cost of repairs was outrageous, and the plaintiff, emboldened by wealth and arrogance, was determined to make Daniel pay. Daniel glanced up when Marcus entered, relief flooding his tired eyes. "You sure about this, kid?" he whispered as Marcus slid into the chair beside him. Marcus gave a small nod. "I've got this. Trust me." But trust wasn't enough. Daniel knew his brother was smart, brilliant even, but this was a courtroom. This wasn't about clever arguments over the dinner table or winning debates at school. This was the real world, where trained attorneys and a skeptical judge could chew a teenager alive. The opposing attorney, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a smirk that looked permanently etched into his face, leaned back in his chair when he noticed Marcus. He whispered something to his client, the wealthy neighbor who wore a custom suit and smug grin, and both chuckled quietly. To them, the case already looked won. Then came the judge. Judge Halberd was a man known for his sharp tongue and sharper gavel. He had spent decades presiding over cases both trivial and significant, and he carried himself with the weary arrogance of someone who believed he'd seen it all. He shuffled in through the side door, his black robe flowing behind him, and settled into his high seat with the authority of a king taking the throne. "All rise," the bailiff barked, and the courtroom stood before settling back into their chairs. As the judge scanned the room, his eyes inevitably landed on Marcus. He squinted, his expression shifting from confusion to amusement. Clearing his throat, he addressed the boy directly. "Son," Judge Halberd said, his voice carrying easily across the hushed chamber, "you're a little out of place, don't you think? This isn't a school project. This is a court of law." A chuckle rippled through the room. The opposing attorney smirked even wider, clearly enjoying the judge's jab. Daniel tensed, ready to defend his brother, but Marcus placed a calming hand on his arm before speaking. "I understand, Your Honor," Marcus replied evenly, his voice steadier than he felt. "But I've been granted permission to speak on my brother's behalf. We don't have the money for legal representation, and I've prepared to argue his case." The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly entertained. Prepared to argue his case? He leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. "Do you even know what that means? This isn't some after-school debate club. Lawyers spend years, decades, studying law, and you think you can just walk in here and play attorney?" Another round of laughter spread through the courtroom. Some of the spectators shook their heads, pitying the boy. Others grinned, waiting for the inevitable humiliation. But Marcus didn't blink. He opened his notebook and flipped to the first page, his handwriting neat and deliberate. I may not have a degree, Your Honor, he said carefully, but I know the truth. And the truth is that my brother is innocent. All I ask is the chance to show you the facts. The judge studied him for a moment, his lips curling into a mocking half-smile. He enjoyed moments like this, moments where he could put arrogant defendants, or, in this case, a naive teenager, in their place. Fine, Judge Halberd said, finally, tapping his gavel lightly against the bench. If you want to embarrass yourself, I'll allow it. But don't expect me to hold your hand. This court runs on rules, young man, and rules aren't kind to amateurs. The opposing attorney chuckled, audibly, unable to hide his amusement. This should be fun, he muttered, loud enough for Marcus to hear. Marcus sat taller, his jaw tightening. He had expected mockery, ridicule, even disbelief. But none of that mattered. He wasn't here for the judge's approval or the attorney's respect. He was here for his brother. As the proceedings began, Marcus kept his eyes focused on the bench, refusing to let the stares or whispers around him shake his resolve. For weeks, he had pored over legal texts, studied case law, and rehearsed arguments until the words became second nature. He knew the plaintiff's story had holes, and he was ready to expose every single one. The boy, who looked like he should be worrying about algebra homework, was about to face one of the toughest challenges of his life. And though the world seemed convinced he was destined to fail, Marcus was determined to prove them wrong. Because sometimes genius doesn't wear a suit or need anyone's permission to speak the truth. The air in courtroom 3B seemed heavier after Marcus's bold announcement. People shifted in their seats, some leaning forward with curiosity while others folded their arms, waiting for the inevitable crash and burn of a teenager trying to play lawyer. Judge Halberd, his face framed by heavy jowls and narrowed eyes, leaned back in his chair and tapped the gavel against the bench. Once, twice, like a drumbeat of authority. Very well, he said, drawing out the words. If you're so determined to speak for your brother, the court will indulge this little experiment. But understand me, boy, this isn't a stage for theatrics. This is the law. And the law has no patience for children playing dress-up. Laughter rang again from the gallery. Marcus caught sight of a man in the back row, elbowing his friend, whispering with a grin. Even the court stenographer had paused, eyebrows raised, as if silently asking, is this kid serious? But Marcus didn't flinch. He sat upright, his notebook open on the table, his pen poised like a sword. Inside, though, his stomach twisted. Every mocking laugh dug into him like claws, threatening to tear apart the fragile armor of confidence he had built. Proceed with opening statements, the judge declared, his voice dripping with smug anticipation. Plaintiff first. Then he let his gaze linger on Marcus, the boy wonder. The opposing attorney rose, buttoning his crisp navy suit jacket. His name was Richard Mallory, a man with decades of courtroom experience and a reputation for dismantling opponents with surgical precision. He paced slowly as he spoke, his voice calm and commanding. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Honor, Mallory began, this case is not complicated. My client, Mr. Hargrove, is a hard-working man whose property was damaged recklessly. The defendant, Daniel Rivers, carelessly scraped a vehicle worth more than most people's yearly salary. And instead of taking responsibility, he hides behind excuses. We're here because accountability matters. Mallory turned slightly, gesturing toward Daniel with a look of disdain. This is not about crushing someone of lesser means. It is about fairness. If you damage something, you pay for it. Simple. The jury nodded, murmurs of agreement rippling through them. Mr. Hargrove sat smugly, adjusting his expensive watch, his eyes gleaming as if he were already spending the payout. When Mallory finished, the judge turned to Marcus. Well, Prodigy, the floor is yours. Try not to bore us. Marcus stood slowly, smoothing his shirt as if it were a suit jacket. He glanced at his brother, who gave him the faintest nod of encouragement and then stepped forward. His sneakers squeaked softly, betraying his youth, but his voice when he spoke was calm. Your Honor, members of the court, Marcus began, this case may look simple. My brother stands accused of damaging Mr. Hargrove's car. But appearances can be deceiving. Because the truth is, this case isn't about responsibility, it's about intimidation. The room went still. Some raised their eyebrows, surprised by the boy's boldness. Marcus continued, flipping his notebook open. My brother did not damage Mr. Hargrove's car, and the evidence will prove that. What's really happening is that a wealthy man with resources is using his power to push around someone who doesn't have the money to fight back. But we are here and we will fight back with facts, not wealth. He glanced at the jury, letting his words hang. At the end of this trial, you'll see the truth. And the truth is on our side. For a moment, silence stretched across the courtroom. Then, Judge Halberd chuckled, shaking his head. Spoken like a high school valedictorian. But this isn't a speech contest, son. You'll find that courtrooms run on evidence, not idealism. Don't get too comfortable. The gavel tapped again, as if punctuating his dismissal. The first witness was called. Mr. Hargrove himself swaggered to the stand, his gold watch catching the light. He spoke with the confidence of someone who believed the world bent his will. I saw Daniel Rivers, Hargrove testified, his voice smooth and theatrical, carrying a heavy box up the stairwell. He wasn't careful. He scraped the entire side of my Mercedes-Benz. I confronted him immediately, but he denied it. Now, here we are. The attorney Mallory guided him with gentle, leading questions, painting Daniel as careless and dishonest. The jurors scribbled notes, nodding. When Mallory finished, he gave Marcus a theatrical bow. Your witness, counselor. The sarcasm dripped from the word counselor. Marcus stood, clutching his notebook. His throat felt dry, but he forced his voice to remain steady. Mr. Hargrove, you said you saw my brother scratch your car? Correct. Hargrove replied, smiling smugly. What time was this? Around 6 in the evening. And it was daylight? Yes, the sun hadn't set yet. Marcus flipped to a page in his notebook and held it up. Your Honor, may I submit Exhibit A? The bailiff took the paper to the judge. It was a printed screenshot from a Weather Archive website showing the exact sunset time for that day, 5:12 p.m. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Hargrove's smirk faltered. So Marcus pressed, you claim you saw my brother scratch your car in broad daylight at 6 p.m., but the sun had already set nearly an hour earlier, which means, Mr. Hargrove, you couldn't have seen what you're claiming. Could it be that your memory is mistaken? Mallory jumped to his feet. Objection. The witness may have been mistaken about the exact time, but the event still occurred. The judge smirked. Sustained. Nice try, boy wonder. But poking at details doesn't prove your brother's innocence. The courtroom chuckled again, and Marcus felt heat rise to his cheeks. The judge's dismissive tone stung like a slap. But as he glanced at his brother, who gave him a grateful, hopeful look, Marcus tightened his grip on his notebook. The mocking didn't matter. The truth did. And he wasn't finished. The proceedings continued, but the balance of power had shifted slightly. While the judge and opposing counsel still treated Marcus as a child playing dress-up, the jurors had seen something else, a spark of intelligence, a willingness to challenge details, and a confidence that didn't quite match his years. Marcus sat down, scribbling notes furiously. The judge might mock him, the attorney might sneer, and the spectators might laugh, but deep down he knew he was onto something, and when the time came, he'd make them all eat their words. Because even geniuses in disguise start by being underestimated. The courtroom buzz had barely died down after Marcus's surprising jab about the sunset when the next witness was called. Mr. Mallory, with a thin smile, strutted across the floor. The prosecution calls Mr. Jameson, the building superintendent, Mallory announced. The bailiff swore him in, and Jameson, a wiry man with a perpetually annoyed expression, took the stand. He looked like someone who had lived too long with the complaints of both tenants and landlords, but the way he glanced toward Hargrove revealed an undercurrent of loyalty or maybe debt. Mr. Jameson, Mallory began smoothly, can you tell the court what you saw that evening? Jameson folded his arms. I saw the younger Rivers boy, Daniel, carrying boxes. He scraped one of them against Hargrove's car, plain as day. I told him to be careful, but he ignored me. Would you say his carelessness caused visible damage? Absolutely. That Mercedes had scratches along the driver's side door when he finished. Thank you. Mallory turned to Marcus with a grin. Your witness. Try not to waste the court's time. Marcus rose. His notebook was already open to a page covered in scrawled bullet points. He adjusted his glasses, a nervous tic he developed since middle school, and walked toward the witness stand. Mr. Jameson, Marcus said, his voice calm but firm, you testified you saw my brother carrying boxes, correct? Yes. And you claim he scraped one against Mr. Hargrove's car. Correct. Marcus flipped a page in his notebook. Could you tell the court where you were standing when you observed this? Jameson hesitated. I was by the lobby doors. So, behind glass? Yes. Behind tinted glass? Marcus pressed. Yes, but it's see-through. Marcus nodded slowly. So, you're telling us that through tinted glass at dusk, you saw my brother carrying a box and watched him scrape it against a car in the parking lot? Jameson shifted uncomfortably. Yes. Marcus turned toward the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit B. The bailiff carried another paper to the bench. It was a copy of the building's maintenance request log, one Marcus had secretly obtained through a Freedom of Information request weeks before the trial. Judge Halberd squinted at the paper. What am I looking at? This, Marcus said, turning to the jury, is a log filed by Mr. Jameson himself. On the very same day of the alleged incident at precisely 5:45 p.m., he reported that the lobby's automatic doors were jammed shut due to a sensor malfunction. The doors were locked until a technician arrived at 8 p.m. A ripple of gasps filled the courtroom. Marcus's voice sharpened. So, Mr. Jameson, if the doors were jammed shut and you couldn't get outside until after 8 o'clock, how exactly were you standing at the lobby doors, watching my brother at 6 p.m.? Jameson's face flushed crimson. He opened his mouth, then closed it, sweat beading at his temple. I might have mixed up the time, he stammered. No further questions, Marcus said, turning back to his seat. The jurors leaned in, whispering to each other. Even the court stenographer hid a faint smile as her fingers clacked against the keys. The judge banged his gavel, looking irritated rather than impressed. Order! Order in the court! The boy is playing detective, but this is hardly a Perry Mason episode. Stick to relevant facts, young man. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. The seed of doubt had been planted. Marcus's momentum grows the next half hour saw more testimony, but Marcus was relentless. Each time Mallory called a witness, neighbors, supposed bystanders, even a valet, Marcus chipped away at their credibility with surgical precision. One neighbor swore she'd seen Daniel arguing with Hargrove the night of the incident. Marcus calmly presented her with text message records subpoenaed from her phone company showing she was texting a friend from a restaurant across town at the exact time she claimed to be watching the argument. Another witness insisted Daniel confessed privately to scratching the car. Marcus asked for details. Where, when, what exact words were said? The witness grew flustered, offering vague phrases until Marcus leaned in and asked, funny then, if he confessed so clearly, why did you never mention this in your original statement to police? By the time the witness left the stand, he was sweating bullets, and the jury's earlier nods of agreement had shifted to skeptical frowns. Each cross-examination felt like a chess match. Marcus wasn't just surviving, he was winning, move by move, piece by piece. The mocking laughter from the gallery had gone silent, replaced with murmurs of disbelief. Mallory's frustration Mallory, once smug, now looked visibly annoyed. He leaned over his notes, whispering angrily to Hargrove between testimonies. His confident strut had turned into brisk, impatient pacing. Finally, after another witness faltered under Marcus's questioning, Mallory exploded. Your Honor, this is absurd. We are letting a child turn this courtroom into a circus. He is not licensed, he is not trained, and this charade is undermining the dignity of the court. Judge Halberd banged his gavel. Sustained. Enough theatrics, Mr. Rivers. I've indulged your little act long enough. One more irrelevant point, and I'll hold you in contempt. The judge's glare was sharp, but Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned forward, his voice quiet but steady. With respect, Your Honor, the dignity of this court isn't preserved by silencing truth. It's preserved by pursuing it. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, the judge didn't have a snappy comeback. He simply scowled and waved for the next witness to be called. A cracking facade by the end of the day, the prosecution's case looked shaky. Every confident claim, every piece of testimony had been riddled with holes Marcus had forced open. But the true turning point came when Marcus asked to submit a final exhibit. Photos of Hargrove's car taken 2 days before the supposed accident, showing faint scratches in the exact same spot Daniel was accused of damaging. Mallory objected furiously, but the judge had no choice but to allow the photos into record. The jury studied them with wide eyes, their earlier certainty unraveling. When court adjourned for the day, the gallery buzzed with whispers. "Did you see that kid tear apart the witnesses?" One man whispered. "He's better than half the lawyers I've seen," another muttered. Even the bailiff gave Marcus a small nod of respect as he gathered his papers. But the biggest change was in Daniel. For the first time since the trial began, his older brother smiled, really smiled. He clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "I don't know how you're doing this, but you're amazing." Marcus allowed himself a small grin. "I told you, Dan. Just trust me." Yet as he packed his notes, he caught sight of Judge Halberd glaring at him from the bench, his lips pressed in a thin line. The judge wasn't just irritated, he was rattled. And Marcus knew that meant one thing. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. The next morning, the courtroom felt different. Gone was the faint amusement that had greeted Marcus's first appearance. Now there was tension, a kind of thick, electric air that clung to everyone's skin. Reporters had shown up, word of the teenage lawyer had spread overnight, and the press smelled blood in the water. Judge Halberd entered looking thunderous, his black robes flowing like storm clouds. He wasted no time in glaring at Marcus. "Before we begin," the judge said sternly, "let me make something clear. This is a court of law, not a stage for dramatics. Yesterday, I allowed certain liberties. Today, I will not. If young Mr. Rivers so much as raises an objection without clear legal basis, I will have him removed from this courtroom. Am I understood?" Marcus stood. His legs trembled, but his voice didn't waver. "Yes, Your Honor." The bailiff called the court to order, and Mallory wasted no time in reclaiming ground. "Your Honor, the defense has played games long enough. Today, we intend to demonstrate undeniable proof of Daniel Rivers's negligence." He gestured grandly as an expert witness. A vehicle damage assessor took the stand. The man carried a thick binder and spoke with the measured certainty of someone used to being believed. "I inspected Mr. Hargrove's Mercedes 2 days after the incident," he said, flipping through glossy photographs. The scratches were fresh, consistent with a cardboard box corner dragged against the paint. Mallory smiled, pacing. "And could that level of damage have occurred weeks earlier, as the defense conveniently suggests?" "Highly unlikely. The scratches were clean, unoxidized, and clearly recent." The jury nodded along. For the first time in the trial, the tide seemed to shift back toward the prosecution. Marcus swallowed hard. He flipped through his notebook, searching for an angle, a crack. His notes on automotive paint weren't strong. He wasn't an expert, and unlike the shaky witnesses before, this man seemed solid. When his turn came, Marcus approached the stand cautiously. "Sir," he began, "you say the scratches were fresh?" "Yes." "And you're confident they were caused by a cardboard box?" "Yes, the angle and pattern are consistent." Marcus glanced at the jury, then back at the witness. "But you weren't there when the scratches happened, correct?" The man stiffened. "No, of course not. I'm giving a professional opinion. And that opinion is only as good as the evidence you had to examine." Marcus paused. "So, tell me, when you inspected the car, did you take paint samples to test for age of exposure?" The expert frowned. "That wasn't necessary. Visual inspection was sufficient." Marcus's voice grew firmer. "Respectfully, sir, isn't it true that without lab testing, you cannot conclusively determine when scratches occurred?" The man hesitated. "In some cases, yes." Marcus nodded. So, while you believe the scratches were recent, you cannot prove they weren't there earlier? The expert shifted in his chair, clearly annoyed. Not beyond absolute doubt, no. It wasn't a knockout blow, but it was enough to dull the prosecution's edge. Still, Marcus knew the jury hadn't looked as convinced by him as they had been by the expert. The weight of inexperience pressed on his chest. The judge strikes back. Judge Halberd leaned forward, his face stern. Young man, I warned you about wasting this court's time. Your line of questioning skirts dangerously close to irrelevance. With respect, Your Honor, Marcus began carefully. I was establishing reasonable doubt. Don't lecture me on the law. The judge snapped, slamming his gavel. The sharp crack made Marcus flinch. You may know how to read case files, but you are no attorney. If you continue with these theatrics, I'll hold you in contempt and strip you from these proceedings. Is that clear? Marcus's stomach nodded. The murmurs in the gallery grew louder. Reporters scribbled furiously. For a terrifying moment, Marcus thought it was over, that the judge would yank him out of the courtroom and all his preparation would go to waste. Daniel grabbed his arm under the table. Marcus, he whispered, you don't have to do this. I don't want to see you get humiliated. Marcus shook his head. I have to. For you. But his confidence faltered. His hands trembled as he clutched his pen. For the first time, doubt crept in. Was he just a kid playing dress-up in front of professionals? Mallory's smugness Mallory seized the opening. He strutted in front of the jury, his voice dripping with condescension. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're witnessing here is a boy grasping at straws. He's smart, yes, but clever tricks don't change facts. You heard the expert. The damage is fresh. You saw the photographs. This case is open and shut. Don't let a teenager's theatrics blind you to the truth. The jury nodded again, some looking almost apologetic toward Marcus, as if pitying his effort. Marcus sat down, his chest heavy. The tide was slipping away. A moment of doubt at recess, Marcus retreated to a bench in the hallway. His notes lay scattered in his lap. He rubbed his eyes, exhaustion threatening to overtake him. Maybe the judge is right, he muttered under his breath. Maybe I don't belong here. Daniel sat beside him, quiet for a moment. Then he said softly, do you remember when Dad got sick and we couldn't afford his medicine? You spent nights online, digging through programs until you found that grant that paid for it. You didn't quit then. Don't quit now. Marcus's throat tightened. He closed his notebook, straightened his tie, and looked his brother dead in the eye. You're right. I'm not quitting. Not now, not ever. Back into the fire when the court reconvened, Marcus felt a spark of renewed determination. The prosecution called its final witness, Mr. Hargrove himself. The wealthy businessman walked confidently to the stand, his suit immaculate, his smile smug. This was his show now. I saw the Rivers boy myself, Hargrove declared, carelessly dragging boxes, scratching my car without remorse. When I confronted him, he laughed. That family has no respect. Mallory's questioning was brief, confident, and rehearsed. The jury watched attentively, nodding as Hargrove spoke. When it was Marcus's turn, Judge Halberd gave him a warning glare. Keep it short, boy. Marcus stood, his palms sweating. Hargrove's testimony had been delivered with such certainty that it seemed unshakable. But Marcus had one last card to play, evidence he'd saved for this very moment. He approached the witness stand slowly, his voice steady. Mr. Hargrove, you're certain you saw my brother damage your car that night? Of course. I never forget a slight. Marcus opened his notebook and withdrew a small USB drive, sliding it toward the bailiff. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to submit Exhibit C, a security camera recording from the Rivers family's apartment building parking lot. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge's eyes widened slightly. Proceed. The screen flickered to life, and grainy footage appeared. The timestamp read the night of the alleged incident. It showed Daniel carrying boxes, careful, slow, avoiding Hargrove's car entirely. But then, minutes later, another figure appeared on screen. Hargrove himself, pacing beside his Mercedes, running his hand along the side of the car and frowning. At one point, he crouched, pressing something against the door, a long metal key he pulled from his pocket. The footage clearly showed him dragging it against the paint, creating the very scratches he blamed on Daniel. The gallery gasped. Hargrove's smug face drained of color. That's not what it looks like. Marcus's voice rang out strong and unshakable. No further questions. The courtroom erupts, the jury erupted in whispers. Reporters scrambled to jot down every detail. Even Judge Halberd looked momentarily stunned before slamming his gavel. Order! Order! But the damage was done. Hargrove's credibility had been shattered, and Marcus had delivered a blow so powerful it silenced even his harshest critics. Mallory sat down heavily, his face pale. And Marcus? He simply returned to his seat beside Daniel, his shoulders squared. For the first time, the courtroom wasn't laughing at him. They were staring at him in awe. The courtroom was silent, save for the scratching of reporters' pens and the faint hum of the projector as the damning footage replayed. Mr. Hargrove's face had drained of its smug superiority, his hands trembling on the witness stand. Judge Halberd banged his gavel repeatedly. Order! Order in this court! His voice, normally booming with authority, now sounded strained, almost uncertain. The jury will disregard. Well, he paused, exhaling heavily. Strike that. The jury will consider Exhibit C in full. Mallory, the prosecution's bulldog, was pale. He shuffled through his notes, but the confident fire was gone. Your Honor, this footage, it must be doctored. Surely the court doesn't intend to admit such. Mr. Mallory, the judge cut in sharply. Unless you can provide immediate evidence of tampering, this recording stands. Sit down. The jury's faces told the whole story. Where once they had looked skeptical of Marcus, now they watched him with something approaching reverence. The boy who had stumbled and stuttered through cross-examinations had just pulled off a masterstroke no seasoned lawyer could ignore. The collapse of Hargrove, Marcus stood slowly, his tie slightly crooked but his voice iron-strong. No further questions, Your Honor. The judge nodded, signaling the witness could step down. Hargrove, however, didn't move. He sat frozen, his eyes darting around the courtroom as though searching for an escape. Finally, Marcus spoke again. Your Honor, in light of this evidence, I move that the charges against my brother Daniel Rivers be dismissed in full. Halberd hesitated. For the first time all trial, the man seemed unsure of himself. His gavel hovered above the block. Motion granted. The gallery erupted in cheers. Daniel's eyes filled with tears, and he hugged his brother tightly. You did it, Marcus. You actually did it. But Marcus wasn't done. He turned back toward the bench, his jaw set. Your Honor, I also request the court refer Mr. Hargrove for criminal investigation regarding perjury and attempted fraud. Gasps filled the courtroom. Hargrove jumped to his feet. This is absurd. You can't, but Halberd's gavel cracked like thunder. SIT down, Mr. Hargrove. Bailiff, detain him pending review. The once untouchable businessman sagged as the bailiff took him by the arm. For the first time, he looked small, pitiful even. The judge's demand with Hargrove removed, Judge Halberd fixed his gaze on Marcus. His eyes, sharp and scrutinizing, no longer carried mockery. Instead, they held a mix of confusion and curiosity. Young man, the judge said slowly, approach the bench. Marcus obeyed, clutching his notebook. He felt the heat of the entire room's attention pressing against his back. Halberd leaned forward, his voice low but carrying. Who are you? You are not a licensed attorney, and yet you have conducted yourself with more precision and strategy than many I've seen in my 20 years on the bench. Explain yourself. The gallery hushed to absolute silence. Reporters froze, pens in midair. Marcus took a steadying breath. This was the moment he had dreaded and prepared for. Your Honor, I am Marcus Rivers. I'm 17 years old. And while I am not a practicing attorney, he hesitated, then pulled a folded letter from his pocket. I am a certified legal apprentice enrolled in an accelerated pre-law mentorship program recognized by the State Bar. He handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Halberd adjusted his glasses, scanning the letter. His eyes widened as he read aloud. Marcus Rivers has successfully completed advanced coursework in legal theory, mock trial, and case analysis. He has been granted provisional clearance to observe and assist in trial proceedings under supervision. The judge's voice faltered. He looked at Marcus with a new expression, respect tinged with something else. Ah, the revelation. You mean to tell me, Judge Halberd said slowly, that you are the youngest certified legal apprentice in the state? Marcus nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I wasn't trying to deceive the court. I only wanted to defend my brother when no one else believed in us. We couldn't afford a lawyer, and I couldn't stand by while Daniel was railroaded by lies. For once, the judge had no scathing retort. He sat back, rubbing his temples. The courtroom remained stunned into silence. Finally, he spoke. When you first walked into this courtroom, I mocked you. I thought you were a child playing dress-up, wasting my time. But today, you have shown courage, intellect, and integrity. You exposed the truth when others sought to bury it. He banged his gavel, not in anger, but in solemn acknowledgement. This court owes you an apology, Marcus Rivers. And I owe you one as well. The crowd erupted again, applause, cheers, even tears from strangers who had come in as skeptics but were leaving as believers. Aftermath, outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed the brothers. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. Marcus, how does it feel to outwit seasoned lawyers at 17? Do you plan on becoming the youngest attorney in state history? What's next for you? Marcus shielded his eyes from the flashes, overwhelmed but smiling faintly. All I wanted was justice for my brother. That's all that mattered. Daniel clapped him on the back. Don't let him fool you. He's going to be a lawyer one day, and probably a judge, too. The crowd laughed, and for the first time in weeks, the Rivers brothers felt hope instead of fear. The judge's reflection later that night, Judge Halberd sat alone in his chambers. The image of Marcus standing tall in the courtroom replayed in his mind. He whispered to himself, almost grudgingly, that boy. No, that young man is going to change the law one day. A rare smile tugged at his lips, and I'll be the first to say I was wrong about him. Epilogue News outlets across the state ran headlines the next morning. Teenager outsmarts judge and lawyers in stunning courtroom victory. 17-year-old legal prodigy exposes wealthy businessman's lies. Future attorney? Youngest legal apprentice shocks court. Marcus read the articles with a mixture of pride and humility. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. Law school, the bar exam, years of proving himself. But now, he also knew something else. He belonged. As he tucked away his notebook that night, Daniel entered the room. So, genius attorney, he teased. What's your next case? Marcus smiled, flipping the notebook closed. Whatever comes my way. But first, I think I need to finish my math homework. The brothers laughed, the sound carrying through their small apartment. For once, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a promise.